Well, first I want to speak directly to our BCTF members. Thank you for the support and determination you've shown these past 2 weeks as you walk the picket lines. Every morning I join picket lines, and as I answered media questions, you and your colleagues stood with me proudly, and then you told journalists your own stories with passion and professionalism. Our rotating strikes have made a real impact. The public conversation and understanding about class size, class composition, and the role of specialist teachers has never been higher. And our rotating action has put the spotlight on these issues. You all should take credit for that. Whether it was talking to parents on the picket line or taking to social media by the thousands, your stories have generated unprecedented level of understanding and support. Keep telling your stories, writing your letters, posting your blogs, and engaging with the public. Your efforts have made a huge difference. Thank you once again. You are amazing. Despite this understanding and support, the government remains entrenched and unwilling to move on our key issues. Yesterday, we reduced our salary proposal as part of a series of significant moves at the bargaining table. But the government responded with nothing. The government employer reps refuse to deal with the issues of smaller class sizes, class composition guarantees, and minimum levels of specialist teachers into our collective agreement so our students can see smaller class sizes next year. And to date, they've not put one single dollar on the bargaining table to address this issue. We've all heard Peter Fassbender say, class size doesn't matter, but as a teacher, and as all teachers can tell you, as well as the academic research, the minister is wrong. And he refuses to acknowledge the growing concerns about class composition. There are more than 16,000 classes in British Columbia with 4 or more children with special needs. 3,800 of those have 7 or more, and there are also 4,600 classes in BC with 7 or more children who are learning the English language. This government must act on class size and composition. They are increasingly isolated on this issue, and it's time to make the investment that will help all our students get that so important one-on-one attention that they deserve. The government has also not moved on their salary offer since April. The government's offer would see teachers take 2 more years of zero, just after we've come off 2 legislated zeros. And instead of focusing on solutions in the last 2 weeks, the government raced ahead with their ill-conceived and chaotic lockout. Obviously, we're disappointed that this government's punitive and aggressive move is being allowed to go ahead. We will look at our legal options and make decisions in the coming days to deal with the LRB decision. Christy Clark's lockout has created a lot of chaos and disruption in our schools across British Columbia. We want to see the end to that chaos and a fair resolution to this dispute. As the lockout continues, more field trips will be canceled, report cards will not be able to be completed in full, and students will not have access to their students at recess and lunch. That's why we remain focused at the bargaining table. That's why we continue to try to persuade this government that they must bring the funding that's needed for a fair deal for teachers and, most importantly, better supports for our students. Even before the Labour Relations Board ruling, the BCTF executive met to discuss our next steps. We decided last night that the time has to come to apply even more pressure to the negotiating table. To get a fair deal and better supports for students, it's time to exert the maximum pressure possible. Therefore, teachers will be asked to vote on our next stage of job action. Teachers will cast their ballots on Monday, June 9th and Tuesday, June 10th. The ballot will ask teachers to prove escalation up to and including full withdrawal of services. If approved, this would most likely mean a full-scale strike within the next 2 weeks. By order of the Labor Relations Board, we must give 3 working days' notice before starting such action. In the meantime, we will continue with rotating strikes next week, and we will announce the schedule tomorrow. Taking job action is never easy, and these decisions are not made lightly. Every single one of us wants the best for our students. We don't take action lightly, but the rotating strikes have shown that parents understand what we're fighting for and why we must continue forward. The vote itself will apply pressure on both sides and hopefully spur the movement needed from the employer to help us reach that deal. There's still time for government to act and prevent a full-scale strike. It's time for Premier Christy Clark to put the funding on the table that will bring both sides closer to enable the deal that we all want. If Clark is sincere about labor peace and putting families first, she has the power to avert a full-scale strike. She must give BCPC the funding to bring us closer together. But Ms. Christy Clark needs to act soon. Teachers are looking for a fair deal, one that includes better supports for our students. It's time the government climbed out of their entrenched positions and offered a deal that works for BC education system. Thank you.
Jim, 10% wage rollback means about $1 million a day to your members. Can the BCTF afford to supplement teachers' wages?
Well, the issue of the rollback, the LRB made that decision today, and we'll be looking at what our options are in that regard.
We're hearing possibly the BCTF can't afford to supplement the wages of teachers losing that 10%.
That's not a question that we're talking about. It's a punitive action by the employer because, we are in our classrooms. Despite the Labor Relations Board ruling, we are in our classes when we're not on a rotating strike, working as hard as we can to meet the needs of our students, except during those partial lockout hours. And it's unfortunate that the government saw the need to create the chaos and the confusion and partially lock us out when in our job action, stage 1 and even stage 2, we were working with our students, we're meeting with our parents, we were doing our report cards, and we were doing planned voluntary activities which weren't affected. And now all that has been affected by their partial lockout.
Jim, when is the earliest possible date for a full-scale strike?
Well, I just said that it's possibly within 2 weeks. But of course, what we need is this government. For us, we're going to take the vote, and that's important because we promised our members that before we considered moving to stage 3, we would do another province-wide vote with them. But for us, it's not wanting to move to the next level. It's about getting the agreement at the bargaining table. But we know for any agreement to happen, government has to bring the funding to the table to get a fair deal for teachers and better supports for students. And so far that government has not brought that funding that's needed. And it's not apparent that they actually want to deal with us, and that's so unfortunate, but we got to make it happen.
BCTF rolled back the wage increase proposal, and BCPC still said BCTF is asking too much.
Well, I think it's time that the employer has a proposal, and we don't consider it fair. We've just taken 2 years of zero, legislated, the only union that had 2 years of zeros legislated on them, and now they're in effect offering 2 years of more zeros. And that's not what they offered other unions who settled in the previous 2 years. So we need this government to put forth a fair wage offer on the bargaining table. I've been clear about compromise. We've shown some of that willingness, we've shown some of that faith, and still government has not made a move. And that's why we made another move on salary. And we think now it's time for government to make moves in salary, as well as let's start dealing with the whole issues of smaller class sizes for our students, class composition guarantees, and minimum levels of specialist teachers.
2 weeks ago, you told me that both parties are not in the settlement zone yet. So 2 weeks ago, it was not the time for a mediator to come in. So is it the time for a mediator to come in? Do you think both sides are in the settlement zone now?
Well, you know, we want to be in a settlement zone, and that's why we've made some moves. And like I've said, we want a compromise, we want a settlement, but we need government to begin moving on those two key issues. And when government starts moving, maybe we'll get closer to a settlement zone, and we can. The issue of a mediator is one of the options that's open to us through the Labor Relations Board, and it's something that we can think about, but both sides have to get closer. But we need government to show some willingness to move, and so far we haven't seen that.
We're talking a lot about pressure here, trying to put pressure on the government with a move to go to a full-scale walkout. Is there any sense of decreasing the pressure, de-escalating the pressure to try to get to an agreement?
Well, we think that the pressure is happening right now. They are feeling the pressure, and in terms of the pressure of our action, in terms of getting the message out and the importance of needing to see smaller class sizes for our students, dealing with the issues of class composition and dealing with minimum levels of specialist teachers. And we've had the Supreme Court decision in January where government violated our constitutional rights for the second time and said those provisions need to be restored. And we need government to step up to the plate, provide the funding that's needed.
Jim, you said you have an unprecedented amount of understanding and support, but we're seeing frustration build amongst the students across the region that they're tired of this and they want a settlement. Aren't you afraid that you're going to lose public support if you vote to escalate to a full strike?
Well, we've been appreciative of the support that we've had with the public and with our parents and students giving voice to the issues. And we know that part of this bargain is about our students' learning conditions, which we know are our working conditions. We have students right now who are going to be graduating grade 12 who first came into kindergarten grade 1 back in 2002 when our provisions, our guarantees for them were legally stripped of our collective agreement. And they have gone through their whole K-12 system experiencing larger class sizes, more cuts, less access to specialist teachers, less one-on-one attention. And we need to guarantee for our next generation of students who are entering kindergarten come September, and for those students that are in there in K-12 now who aren't graduating, that they can start actually having smaller class sizes, better conditions for their learning, and have that so important one-on-one attention with our teachers and with specialist teachers. You can't underestimate the importance of having time to talk with the child about their learning and about how their day is going. It's priceless.
If we go back to the LRB decision today, you're talking about looking at your legal options. The decision looks pretty clear-cut. There's not a lot of wiggle room here. It's not part of the essential service legislation.
You know, there are some parts in that decision that seem to be clear-cut. Part of the decision talks about other options that we may consider, and we'll be looking at those options.
Will you look at a third-party arbitrator?
Again, mediation and arbitration are open to us through the Labor Relations Board. It's something that both parties can agree to. And what we need, though, is a willingness on government to bring funding to the table. Let's get us closer. That's what we want. Let's negotiate a deal at the bargaining table.
You're disappointed that the government has been slow off the mark responding to your wage concession?
Well, we've been very disappointed. We went back to the table yesterday, and we were hoping that government's representatives would come to the table with some moves also. And again, it was us making these moves, and in particular on salary. And that, for us, we showed them some good faith despite their unwillingness, that we're willing to move and that we're about compromising. But bargaining is also about moving forward and not backwards.
So what's the bearing of the LRB decision have on the future contract talks, if any?
The Labor Relations Board decision? Well, it is disappointing, like I said, and our members see this as a punitive action that's preventing them from working with kids at recess and lunch. And they see that, they're in their classrooms working, trying to meet the needs of their students, despite the conditions and the underfunding and the cuts. And for them to experience a 10% pay cut because They're not doing supervision, but they're in their classrooms working. It just doesn't seem right.
Jim, full-scale strike, what does it mean to upcoming provincial exams, report cards, or graduation ceremony that hasn't hosted yet?
Well, if if our vote is successful and we make a decision to go to a full-scale strike, that means all schools will be closed and there will be no instruction happening, and therefore there will be no other activities happening. So that definitely is an impact. But for us, what we need is the Premier of the province to bring the funding, just like she did with the truckers' strike. She brought additional funding to that bargaining table. She said that it's always better to get a deal than a fight. And so we're encouraging her to give the employer's rep the funding, the go-ahead, to seriously come to the table in good faith and get the deal that we all need. A fair deal for teachers and better supports for our students.
I think it has happened before. It has happened before that the strike affected the provincial exams and graduations. I think it happened before, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, we were on an action a couple years ago for 3 days in March, so we haven't been on a full-scale strike probably since 2005 for 10 days, and that was in October.
Your understanding of essential services legislation, how would that play out? A full-scale walkout?
Well, we have an essential services designation right now that says that if we're moving to another stage of action and we're contemplating moving away from rotating strikes, we have to give them 3 days, okay. 3 working days notice. So that's the essential services ruling as it is right now.
But you can still go on a full-scale walkout?
Yes, we can.
You're anticipating being legislated back?
Well, the chief negotiator for the employer says that the government is not going to be legislating us, and that in the past, that's the history of this government, where they've bailed themselves out through legislation rather than coming to the bargaining table in good faith with the necessary funding, except in 2006. In 2006, they had a will. They put the necessary funding on the table to get a deal, and we got a deal before the end of June. We want a deal before the end of June. We don't want this dragging out. We want smaller class sizes for our students come September, class composition guarantees, minimum levels of specialist teachers restored, and we want our students to get that so important one-on-one time that all students need and deserve.
Are you willing to negotiate over the summer?
We want a deal before the end of June. And we've always been willing to negotiate in the summer when it was needed. And in fact, in the last round of bargaining, we actually did bargain in the last few weeks of August, including on Labor Day. But what signal does that send when the Premier of the province, who first says just lock the adults in a room to get a deal, and then starts saying, well, let's bargain in the summer. Well, we want a deal. Are they serious about getting a deal? We don't think so. They haven't shown at the bargaining table. We want the deal before the end of June. And let's not worry about whether we have to bargain in the summer, because let's get the deal now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.